Hey, James here. We're going to be talking about 4 stages of psychological safety. I did a webinar on this yesterday, and it was helpful for people, so I thought I'd come on here and just share some things. So, when you think about creating high-performance teams, right? So think as a leader. It's one thing to lead the individual, right? Like everybody needs to be able to lead, to motivate, inspire that individual employee. So much of our work, like with 9 Minutes on Monday or a lot of our programs, they are targeted at the manager just to help you increase the engagement, the morale, the purpose of each individual employee. Of course, that's what you want. But that's just one part of leadership, because as soon as you lead more than one person, then you begin to have a team. And maybe your team is 3, 5, 7, 10, who knows. But the team is a completely different animal. There's different skill set that's needed. There's different things that bring that together. And in fact, you can be a great leader of an individual. Like you can be amazing at developing and coaching and helping that staff member really bring their best to work each day. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be great at leading the team, right? Because when you have the team together, there's different dynamics in play. And this is where the topic of psychological safety comes in. And, psychological safety is relatively a new term in terms of like the public knowing about it. The term's been around for a long time, but it didn't become mainstream till Google did their project Aristotle, where they wanted to crunch the data and see what makes a great team, right? And then what they found out of that was the best teams have strong team norms on the foundation of psychological safety. So we want to talk about that. I'm going to spend a few minutes here breaking this down, because psychological safety, if you go back in time, there was always talk about trust, right? How trust is important. And of course, trust is essential in relationships. It's important with leadership, and trust is really important with teams. But the word trust alone doesn't quite capture what psychological safety does. So even though it underpins everything, it's helpful to take a little bit of a deeper dive, a little more nuanced look when you talk about psychological safety, right? Because, well, what is psychological safety? Psychological safety is that idea where people can take an interpersonal risk and they can show up to work and they don't have to fear something or avoid something. So I find this is a helpful metaphor to think of it in this way. So back when the Golden Gate Bridge was being built, the guy who was the project manager was named Joseph Strauss. And back then, there was a ratio that you could use to predict how many people would die on a project. And it was one person for every $1 million spent in the budget. And so the budget for the Golden Gate Bridge was around $35 million, which just meant 35 people are going to die as we build this bridge across, the Narrows. Well, this guy, Joseph Strauss, he looks at this and thinks, I'm not good with that, all right? Like, I'm not okay with this number, which is a great sign of leadership, right? Like not accepting the status quo. And so something's got to be done. We can do better. And so he came up with the idea that we want to build a safety net underneath the bridge as we go, so that if somebody falls, they're just going to fall into the net. And so he had to pitch this, of course, to the owners of the project, who were resistant because, well, this was going to cost more money, about $3 million in today's terms, and it was going to cost more time, and they didn't want the project to be delayed. But he won them over, and they built the safety net. And what happened was they finished the bridge ahead of schedule and under budget. Now think about this for a moment, because what was happening now is you had people working, right? Like they're building this bridge, but instead of measuring everything, like being so careful with each step, like taking all that mental resource that you should put into your job, your craft, in this case, construction, and you're having to divide it. Construction, but I don't want to die. Construction, but I don't want to slip. Construction, I got to feed my family. And so it's that dual focus that takes people away from being truly engaged. So, we talk about employee engagement, employees are usually engaged. It's just what are they engaged in? And in this case, if you don't have a safety net, they're engaged all right, but they're just not engaged in the task at hand. And so what do we need to eliminate to free that energy up to focus it in on the task at hand? And so as Joseph Strauss saw it, what was important is like, let's have people feel safe. And so then they're able to focus. So that's a great analogy of psychological safety because it's very similar. Now you might think, well, I mean, that's physical safety. Psychological safety's got to be different. I mean, yes and no. It's still predicated on the same thing, that there's a fear of something, right? Fear of death if you're on the Golden Gate Bridge, but a fear of judgment, a fear of loss, a fear of being alienated from your tribe. And so let me give you an example of something that I recently did. So I was speaking. One of our clients, they were having a leadership summit, and so I was out there to talk to all of these leaders from all over the country, and I was going to talk to them about psychological safety. But before I did, like before I even got into psychological safety, I said, "Hey, let's just take a moment and get some audience involvement." And I had this bag up front, and I said, "I have all of your names in this bag, and I'm going to draw one of your names out. And if I draw your name, I want you to come on up, and you're gonna give a 5-minute speech on the 3 things you think great leaders do." All right. And I had a couple of names written in there. And I said, so for example, and I'd pull out a couple of names, if I were to call you, then it would be, you would have to come up. But anyways, that's what we're going to do. And let's be really supportive of whoever gets chosen. And let me pick a name now. And so I'm putting my hand in the bag. Now, of course, I'm not going to give somebody 5 minutes of my time, right? I'd only had so much time. But I knew what was going on in the audience. Apart from a couple of people who are like, yeah, pick me. Most everyone else was like, heck no, right? Like I want to exit the room, or basically feeling that stress. And so in that moment, because of how I was leading the room, a whole bunch of people had an influx of cortisol and adrenaline dumped into their bloodstream, right? Which is what we do when we're stressed or we're a bit afraid. And so after I told them, look, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to have one of you come up here. But I said to them, you know that feeling you just had, for most of you, that's the opposite of psychological safety, right? Because it's danger from a psychological perspective. And I also said, you are the leaders, so you come to your workplaces every day and you're the top. And so you never feel like this. But a lot of your people do if they don't have a psychologically safe environment. And when that's the case, they're like the guys on the Golden Gate Bridge without the safety net. Yes, I need to work, but let me watch my back. And that split focus robs people's engagement. So having said all that, let me just go back here for a moment. Psychological safety. We understand what it is, but how do you create it? Right? How do you create more psychological safety in your teams? And here's the thing, you have to build it in stages, and there are 4. Let me make my little circle smaller here. There are 4, and that's what I want to walk you through here in the short time that we have. And when you build each of the 4 stages of psychological safety, you're going to see morale improve, communication flow. People are going to be happy that they're on your team. Right? They're going to be happy that they're on your team. So let's talk through the 4 stages. I'll briefly give an outline of each, but safe to be myself, safe to learn, safe to contribute, and safe to challenge. So no model is perfect, of course, but this really outlines a fantastic way to approach psychological safety. So let's walk through each of these stages. So the first stage, it's safe to be myself. This is inclusion safety. And it satisfies the basic human need to connect and belong. And it's the foundation upon which the other stages are built, ensuring that team members feel included and accepted. We'll do a deeper dive on this in just a moment. But this is the bottom level, right? This is the foundational level. Safe to be myself. The second one, safe to learn. Learner safety allows people on your team to engage in the learning process, ask questions, acquire skills without fear of being seen as incompetent or ignorant. And mistakes are not held against them, but rather are used as opportunities to grow and learn. Have you ever been in a meeting and you just didn't understand what somebody just said? Or maybe you were thinking about something else and then you realized you weren't paying attention, and all of a sudden somebody says something and you're like, wait, what? I don't understand what's going on. And what you should do in that moment is just ask a question and clarify. But what most people do is they hesitate because they don't want to look stupid, right? They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to step off the scaffolding and fall into the icy Pacific Ocean, right? It's the same idea. I don't want to put myself in danger here. And so then they hold back, right? Or somebody makes a mistake and they try to cover it up because they don't want people to know. How's this going to make me look? I might get in trouble. And when we cover up the mistake, who knows the impact that we're having? I mean, look at some of the stories in the news right now of some big mistakes that were made in manufacturing, right? And when somebody knows they make a mistake, but they hide it, it's a sign that they're not in a psychologically safe culture. So safe to learn is an important thing, right? If people make a mistake and they're jumped on or punished, then what's going to happen is just you think, well, this will send the message for people not to make a mistake. Well, it sends the message that if you do make a mistake, like, don't tell anybody about it. Obviously, there's limits here, right? Things like safety and stuff like that, there's just like no room for error. But when there is an error, how do we use it? Like, how do you use that on your team when somebody makes a mistake? Because I will bet you that not a week goes by that at least one person on your team makes a mistake. And so how do you handle those? And are those learning opportunities? And does the team actually value those as learning opportunities? The third one, safe to contribute. Contributor safety enables team members to use and apply their skills and talents for the benefit of the team, right? Encouraging active involvement in the contribution of ideas. Ideas are not criticized. I was working with a senior team, and they are in a very creative space, and so they had to do a lot of brainstorming. But the problem is, especially for creatives, is we take our ideas and we attach a certain part of ourselves to them. And so then if somebody criticizes the idea, we can feel a little bit hurt. So that was happening in this team. And so over time, what happened was people didn't want to throw any ideas out anymore. They didn't want to put an idea into the center because it was just going to be murdered on site. And they even said that, like, why should I throw an idea out? It's just going to get bashed up. And so the team had to have a conversation about that, and they began to realize it's not safe to contribute here. And so what do we need to do to change as a team? So some of these things are so subtle, and the team may not necessarily pick up on that, but you as the leader have to be, right? You have to look out for times where things might be unsafe, where somebody's trying to contribute. We want people to feel safe to put up their hand and say, hey, I have an idea. Even the newest hire, right, who may not understand yet that something can't be done, we want them to feel like, hey, what about this? We want that. And if you're not hearing that, like if you're not hearing a lot of ideas, it's one thing if you're asking, but it's another thing if you're just not hearing them when you're not asking. This could be a sign that it's not safe to contribute. Regardless of how much you feel it's safe to contribute, the people's perspective is their truth, right? Their perspective is their truth, and that's always important to understand. And the last one is safe to challenge. Challenger safety empowers team members to challenge the status quo and propose changes without fear of retaliation or damage to reputation. People have the permission to speak freely. People have the freedom to be honest, even in a survey. Imagine being able to do surveys and not have to have anonymous surveys, right? But why do we have anonymous surveys? Because it's not safe to speak truthfully. And this would be a great acid test for you, is when people get to the point where they can just speak their mind, respectfully, of course, professionally, but they can just speak their mind. So if you remember there was a great book that was written. This goes back a ways now, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. I love the book. It's a great book. It's a great read. But there's also a challenge to it. And in the beginning of the book, it outlines, in a sense, the problem where there's a lack of trust and a lack of honesty, right? And so the idea is like people need to be more honest. They need to be able to challenge each other. And that's true. But my only critique about the book, The Five Dysfunctions, is that there is a certain order to getting there. In other words, if you read that book and then you think, okay, we need to start challenging each other, you're starting off at the wrong level. It's like, let's put the roof on the house before we have even put up the walls. It's just not going to work. You have to put these other stages in place first in order for people to feel safe to challenge. And I'll get into that more in a moment. But let's go back to it's safe to be myself. Right? So again, this is the most foundation of all the 4 stages. And when you get this level strong, everything above it becomes easier. So here's a good way to think of inclusion safety. It's this idea that it's safe to be myself. I'm accepted, I'm respected, I'm wanted, and I'm needed. Think about those things. In fact, they're all very subjective things. They are all feelings. They're all a feeling that someone has, right? You ever had a situation where someone says like, well, I just feel like I'm not wanted here. And it doesn't matter how much rational evidence you give them. If they have this feeling like, oh, I just feel like I'm not wanted here. That's their truth in that moment. Like something has happened and then they have given it their own interpretation, which you can't control, and they've come to the conclusion that they're not wanted. So this is why it's important to understand that regardless of how you think your team's doing, that doesn't mean that that's how your team is doing. I've made this mistake many times in my career, thinking our team's amazing. Everybody loves being on this team, only to find out later, either with a survey or an assessment or a 360, that not everybody was as keen as me, right? But think about these 4 things for a moment. You want everyone on your team to be able to feel these 4 things. And these are all exclusive of one another. In other words, somebody can feel respected, but just not wanted. Yeah, I feel respected on my team. I just feel like they don't want me. Or I'm respected here, but I'm just not needed. I'm respected, but I'm just not accepted as, one of the group. So it's not just focusing on one of them. It's doing the things that are going to help people have those emotions. And I'll give you some ideas of how to do that in a moment. And basically, here's how it happens. Like, here's how you create that inclusion safety. Basically, there's 4 things. 4 things you can do. Have more inclusive meetings, have distributed decision-making, have recognition of diverse contributions, and by creating more moments of affinity and cohesion in your team. So obviously, I don't have time to walk through all 4 of these, and even all 4 of these, we can break these down into smaller things. But let me just make a comment about inclusive meetings. The meeting is one of the best places that you can use to build psychological safety, because outside of the meeting, the team doesn't really have a lot of context. I mean, you're working together, I get that, but it's when you are together as a group that so much happens, right? So much good or potentially so much bad happens, and we don't want that to happen. So inclusive meetings, I want you to, if you're not doing this, I want you to think about some of these ideas with your meetings. Number 1, stop leading the meetings. What you want to do is you want to start giving everyone else a turn to facilitate the meeting. In fact, this is a great idea, especially if you're a really strong leader and you are very capable, and a lot of people look at you as the smartest person in the room, and you're the one that have all the answers. That's the perfect time to stop leading meetings, because what will happen is people just then defer everything to you. And I've seen this happen in big companies, and I've also seen where a CEO will step aside and not lead the meeting, and they'll just be a member in the meeting, right? So the idea is to give everyone a chance to facilitate. Now, this is going to make some people nervous, just like me pretending I'm going to pick a name out of the hat of that group of leaders. And so that's why you've got to give some training, right? How to facilitate a meeting. And if somebody's really nervous about it, then pair them up to start, or have them just lead a section. Hey, I want to have an icebreaker at the meeting. I want you to come up with it. I want you to lead that one. So sometimes you got to take people where they're at, help them grow in some confidence, but you want everyone to have a chance to facilitate the meeting. Plus, it's going to be a lot more fun. People are going to bring different perspectives. They're going to bring different. Some are going to be more fun than others. They're going to bring their uniqueness. But what are we doing here? We're getting people to feel needed, right? To feel wanted. These are just small things that we can do. The other thing that we want to do in our meetings is to have some sort of rules of the road. And what you want to do is you want to get your team together and just say, hey, how can we if we were going to make some rules here for how we communicate each other, kind of some rules that we always obey, what would they be? I would just think about when you grew up, probably around the dinner table. If your dinner table was like mine, there were certain rules, right? They weren't spelled out, like they weren't on a flip chart. There was no whiteboard in the kitchen or where we ate. There were rules. If you broke them, you found out, right? So there was just a rule on how you spoke to your sister. As much, she might be aggravating you so much, but how you speak to her, there's a rule about that. So in the similar sense, you want to get the team together and say, what would be some rules that we want to come up with for how we communicate in meetings? And there's probably going to be some simple things come up, like let's not interrupt each other. Like when somebody's talking, let them finish. Or I don't know, maybe you're working construction and foul language is a problem, and the group says let's cut that out. Okay, it's in a sense it doesn't matter what the rules are; it's what the group wants to create as the rules. Now you don't want to like 20 rules. You don't want to do that, but you would just want to have a couple, and then of course you want to enforce them, and you can do that in a fun way, right? You can find people and have a little tip jar or something like that, and at the end of the month, I don't know, you buy some donuts or something for the crew. But the idea is that everyone gets together and decides how things are going to go. So like that executive group in the really creative space, what they had to come up with was when somebody throws a new idea on the table, and they use the metaphor of a baby, don't kill the baby when it's still young. And so when somebody throws an idea on the table, don't kill the baby. Let's take a few minutes and just think about how it could work and what are the good parts of this idea. And then we'll switch and we'll talk about why this might not work. Right? So that was an example of them coming up with a rule. Now, what does that do? That creates safety. There are safety in rules. There are safety in law and order. There's safety in boundaries. So now somebody knows, okay, if I throw my idea, it's not going to get like shot right away. And they may not trust it at first until they do it, and then they realize, oh, okay, that wasn't that bad. That's an important. The third thing I would mention about inclusive meetings is find a way to get everyone to contribute. There's a couple techniques that you can do for this. One of them is round robin discussions. So at some point in your meeting, have a chance where you're going to expect everyone to speak up. And it might sound like this: hey, so I want to know what you guys think about what I just said. And so let's go around the room. I'd like to hear from all of you. That would be an example of a round robin discussion where you've made it clear you want to hear from everybody. Another technique that you can do to get people contributing, especially quieter members, right, is split people up into pairs. Let's say you have a bigger team. Let's say you have 6 people on your team, and then you could say, hey, I want to hear your ideas about this, or I want you to critique what I just brought up. So let's do this. Let's break up into pairs, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and then let's all meet back again together. And so that would be another example of people having a chance to speak and contribute, so even quieter members. And then the last technique with that is just calling on people. So if somebody hasn't spoken up during a meeting and you really want them to weigh in, then you're going to tell them that you value their opinion. Like, in other words, you won't say, hey, Sarah, you're quiet today. What's up? We don't want to do that. That shines a light on somebody, throws a little bit of embarrassment on them. But a different conversation is, hey, Sarah, I really want to hear your thoughts about this because And, what is something about Sarah that makes you want to hear her thoughts, right? Because I always love how you break things down, or because of your background, I really want to hear what you think about this. All right, so that would be an example, again, of inviting someone in. Because what are we trying to do? We're trying to make people feel needed, wanted, respected, and accepted. So there are multiple things to that. But anyways, that's just inclusive meetings. There's 3 other ways that you can work on to create more safety, just that first level, right? Safe to be me. But like I said, there's 4 stages here. Safe to be myself, safe to learn, safe to contribute, and safe to challenge. So I just got a couple of minutes left. Let me briefly talk about this last one, safe to challenge, right? Because this is kind of like the ultimate benchmark of psychological safety, when people feel like they can speak up. And the challenge is, we have all grown up in a culture where we are taught to obey authority. Our parents, our coaches, our bosses, and of course, that's what makes society work, when there's at least some order to things. But the problem is that gets really drilled down into our psyche. And one of the reasons we need psychological safety, especially all the way up to this higher level about safe to challenge, is because this is what creates better places to work. So if I take us all back to 2003, was it, when NASA had their shuttle disaster? And if you remember during that time, when they did an independent inquiry after to go, why did the space shuttle explode? And, of course, it was because the heat tile was cracked and compromised on re-entry into the atmosphere. But the study found a second reason for the crash, and they said it was NASA's culture. And NASA's culture was a very top-down culture. It was not safe. In other words, people had concerns. They had concerns about safety, but they didn't feel like they could bring it up. You might get fired, you might get punished, you might not get your next promotion, you might get put in a doghouse. And so what happens is it hinders that. And so there was no avenue or freedom. And the result of that, 7 people died, and billions of dollars lost to NASA and, of course, the shuttle program, all because leaders created a culture that wasn't safe. I'll give you another example. Don't mean to pick on you, Wells Fargo, but a number of years ago, when someone over there thought it was a good idea to create some really high benchmarks of how many accounts people needed to open, and then dialed up the accountability on an unreachable target. That's just a bad combination, by the way, because people are going to take shortcuts. And so that's what happened. People are opening all these false accounts. And obviously there wasn't safety there for people to push back and say, this is insane. Like, this is totally crazy. And had there been that culture, then that would have saved Wells Fargo billions of dollars. I think $3 billion. I can't remember the final number, but that was an expensive lesson when you don't have psychological safety, right? And like I said, this last stage is the most difficult of all the stages. And again, that comes back to the weight of the weight of authority. And I love the study that Bickman did, where he basically had a person walk down the street and just stop strangers and say, hey, that guy's parking meter is going to run out. Can you go plug his meter? And what they found was that 33% of people actually did that, responded, good neighbors. But then that same person put on a security guard uniform, so it looked just a little bit more official, carried some authority, and then stopped people, ask them the same thing, can you plug that guy's meter? And now 89% complied, right? Almost 9 out of 10 people, because authority has weight to it. And here's the problem when it comes to trying to create psychological safety, especially the safety to challenge, is because we are going against these primal needs. This is a look at Maslow's hierarchy, right? Physiological needs, safety and security. Hey, I don't want to speak up because I need this job. I don't want to get fired. I got a mortgage to pay. I got 3 kids or 5 kids or how many kids you have, or I got 8 cats and dogs. I can't lose this job. I'm not going to speak up. Or I don't want to be exiled from the tribe, so to speak, love and belonging. And because these needs are so important to us, we really have to work hard as leaders to create an environment that is safe, okay? So hope that makes sense. Challenger safety must be invited, but you can't start there. You got to start all the way back. Safe to be myself, right? Safe to be me. So on having said all that, and I got to go because I got a meeting coming up, but I wanted to let you know, I want to invite you to something. And we are kicking off our 4-week cohort on the 4 stages of psychological safety. And basically, it is designed to take you through all of the stages and help you implement them so that you can begin to build more psychological safety with your team. Now, it's a 4-week journey, and let me just outline kind of 30,000-foot view of how this goes. In the first week, you're gonna go through the first stage, right? That's safe to be me. How do I create more inclusion safety with my team? And the training is about 30 minutes long. You do that on your own. Then the week 2, you're going to do something similar. We're going to learn more about safe to learn, right? Safe to make mistakes, learner safety, and similar type of thing. You'll do some training on your own, but then that week, we pull everybody together for a group implementation call. And this is where we're going to coach you, make sure that you are able to start implementing this stuff. Because, hey, it's no good just learning some information if we're not going to put it into practice. And we're going to do this on week 3. We're going to show you how to create more, not just learner safety, but contribution safety. And then in the week 4, we're going to get to the big one, right? Challenger safety. And then we'll pull everyone back together again. We'll have another group implementation call. So that's what we're going to do in the 4-week journey, the 4-week cohort. And we have a couple bonuses that we're going to give with this program. One is our psychological safety survey that we use with our clients that measures the 4 stages and will help you. You can do this with your team. We'll totally set it up for you. You'll have the questions to ask, and you can use this with your team, and you'll find out, you'll have a really quick snapshot at the beginning of the program where you're at, and then we're going to be able to help you move the needle, all right? We're also going to give you a second bonus, and this is our program on growth mindset. And I don't have time to get into why this is so important, but this is integral to any great team working, especially with psychological safety. And so you're going to get a chance to go that. But the goal is for you to turn your group into a high-performance team through deep trust and psychological safety, okay? So that's the 4-week journey. It kicks off on August 19th. And the 2 calls that we're going to do, August 29th, September 12th. I'm going to, if you're interested in this, there's going to be a link either in the comments below this video, wherever this video is being hosted, wherever you're actually watching this right now, I'll put the link to where you can go to sign up and get more information, all right? Now, again, this starts on August 19th. The price to go into the cohort is $497, but if you register early, as in right now, this week, we're going to take $200 off of that. You can do this for $297. All right. So, like I said, I'll put a link in the comments so that you can find out more information. But the result, right? The result of all this, happy employees who love your team. And for you, the joy of creating an environment that brings out the best in your staff. Like imagine having the team that's the example in the entire company, right? Because of the safety that you guys have built because of your leadership. And so that's what we're gonna help you do. All right. So that's the psychological safety cohort. Again, that begins on August 19th. If you want more information, look for the link below. If you can't find this link anywhere, go to my website, jamesrobbins.com, and you will see a link. Probably it'll pop up at the top of the stage, or just go to the upcoming workshops section and you'll find out more. Love to see you in the program. Like I said, it's a cohort that's a month long. Won't take you a lot of time, but it will pay dividends in a huge, huge way. All right? Hope you're doing well. Keep leading in an amazing way, and appreciate you even watching this because it shows me you're the kind of leader that wants to lead a great team for your employees.